The first red flag wasn't the fraudulent vendor payments. It was the neon post-it note someone slapped on my office door that read Compliance Queen Crown, and I don't think it was meant kindly. That morning, I just flagged a $482,000 discrepancy in our vendor disbursements again. 4 months in a row, the same two shell companies, same padded invoices, same cozy internal approvals. I wasn't shocked, just exhausted. Fixing other people's cover-ups had become my unofficial job description. I didn't even look up when Blake, the CEO's son and walking LinkedIn post, swaggered past my desk with his cold brew and his fresh title, Chief Strategy Officer. He was 2 weeks into the job and already allergic to eye contact with anyone not holding a mirror. I'd just finished drafting a memo to legal, pending escalation, vendor anomaly unresolved. Timeline to internal disclosure, 5 days remaining. If that sounds dry, good. Dry is safe. Dry doesn't make headlines. Dry doesn't send federal agents to your lobby, but let me back up. I'm Joanna Price, Chief Compliance Officer at a mid-sized logistics tech firm that grew too fast, hired too sloppy, and thought governance was something you sprinkle on top like parsley. I wasn't flashy, but I knew every line of code in our internal controls. My role, quiet behind the scenes, was the dam holding back the flood. If I did my job right, no one noticed. If I didn't, well, the Department of Justice sure would. Now here's where I pause for a second, because 90% of y'all listen to stories like this without subscribing. I see you. Yes, you. If you're liking this train wreck already, hit that like button and subscribe. It seriously motivates the team to keep digging up these stories that make you yell at your phone like you're on Judge Judy. Okay, let's keep going. That week, I'd quietly flagged the anomaly for internal resolution for the fourth time. Our finance head, Karen with a Y of course, had replied with her usual, "We're monitoring," which meant she hadn't read it. Blake, in his quest to streamline redundant legacy costs, had made a target list. HR, admin, and me, compliance, because why pay someone to stop crimes when you can just hope crimes don't happen? Thing is, I'd been giving them time. I'd built a buffer into our platform, a grace period for them to self-correct before it became a mandatory external disclosure. That timer, it was ticking. I never made a scene. I wasn't a whistleblower. I was a canary in a coal mine who documented everything. Every flagged invoice, every unanswered memo, every system ping ignored by people who thought regulatory exposure was just a fancy way of saying we'll deal with it later. Spoiler, you won't. Sometimes at night, I'd stare at the compliance dashboard glowing like a warning sign and wonder what would happen if I just stopped. Stopped holding it all back. Stopped rerouting fires into whispers. Would anyone notice? Truth is, I was getting tired of being the parachute nobody thanked while they did barrel rolls with their budgets. No one celebrates the crash that didn't happen. But oh, honey, they remember the one that does. And the deadline was close now. 5 days. That's how long I'd given them before the system's silence would become its own scream. 5 days before a small window closed and a mandatory notification opened, a signal to the feds that said, "Something's rotten here and no one's talking." I thought maybe they'd catch it in time. Maybe someone would finally listen. But Blake didn't listen. He smirked, he laughed. He cut me loose like dead weight, and in doing so, he kicked out the one support beam he didn't know was holding up the whole damn house. The first time Blake opened his mouth in an exec meeting, I knew we were cooked. He strolled in 15 minutes late, sunglasses still on his head like he'd just come from Coachella, reeking of expensive cologne and inherited consequence. The title on his slide deck read, "Optimizing Strategic Spend." Translation: fire the people doing the work so Blake could afford more hoverboard lunches. I'd been in that boardroom for 8 years, long enough to remember when we had folding chairs and a coffee pot that growled like it wanted to retire. Blake had been in the company for 12 minutes and already had a personal assistant, a standing desk, and a firm belief that Excel was for peasants. He clicked to a slide showing everyone's salary stacked in bar graphs. Mine was one of the taller ones. "Redundancy and legacy roles," he said, tapping my name like he was swatting a fly. "Compliance overhead, $150K, dead weight." I didn't blink. I just folded my hands and said, "If you're referring to the compliance role, I'd caution against eliminating it before you understand the scope. There's a pending vendor anomaly with federal disclosure implications." He blinked back like I'd spoken Esperanto. "Right, see, that's part of the problem. We've got too many people saying things like federal disclosure implications. Let's focus on ROI, not alphabet soup." Karen with a Y chuckled. The CFO stared at his phone like it owed him child support. The CEO said nothing. Of course he didn't. Blake was his son, his legacy. If Blake wanted to turn the company into a drop-shipping pyramid scheme, Richard would have asked if he needed a PowerPoint template. I kept my voice even. My role exists because the SEC doesn't find oops to be a valid defense. Blake leaned back, arms folded behind his head like a smug finance bro Buddha. "I'm just saying, if the role was really that critical, we wouldn't be able to cut it." No one spoke, not legal, not HR, not the board chair who once told me I was the invisible net under their tightrope. And in that silence, I felt it, the chill, not fear, not even anger, just the quiet knowledge that the grown-ups had left the building and handed the matches to a pyromaniac in Yeezys. Blake wrapped the meeting with a quote from his business coach. Tough decisions make lean companies. He didn't invent the phrase, but he said it like he'd patented it. Then he tossed his water bottle in the trash and walked out before anyone else stood. I sat there another 5 minutes, just breathing, letting the room drain of his cologne and condescension. This wasn't my first storm, but it was the first time I could smell the exact cologne worn by the hurricane. Back in my office, I opened the compliance dashboard again. The vendor alert pulsed in red now, unresolved, 4 days left on the timer. I clicked through the logs, made sure every email, every warning, every internal flag was properly timestamped and archived. Then I opened a blank memo and titled it, 2. Internal legal subject. Reassignment of mandatory disclosure role. Urgent, I typed slowly. Carefully, like someone preparing a parachute that no one else knew they'd need. Because Blake, he was about to leap off a cliff blindfolded, whistling a podcast about grit. And I wasn't going to catch him. Not this time. They scheduled the board review for 8 o'clock a.m. sharp, which in Blake speak meant 8:23 with a latte and smugness in tow. The whole room had that tense, artificially cheerful energy, like a church potluck where everyone knows someone's about to get excommunicated. Blake walked in wearing one of those quarter-zip tech bro sweaters and a watch that could pay off a mortgage. He didn't sit, he presented. Slide 1, Operational Streamlining, Phase 1. Slide 2, My Name. Effective immediately, Blake announced. We're eliminating the Chief Compliance Officer position. His voice carried that casual brutality you hear from someone who's never been told no and assumes gravity works because he said so. Redundancy in oversight. Savings, $150,000 annually. He smiled like he was offering a coupon. A few board members looked confused. One of them, an older guy from Boston who always asked about audit trails, actually raised his hand. Wait, wasn't Joanna involved in the regulatory systems? Blake didn't even glance at me. Her role was inflated. Most of it's automated now. We're investing in AI tools to handle those workflows. Then he chuckled, and added, she'll tell you compliance is a full-time job, but so is Candy Crush if you're bad enough at it. Laughter. Thin, awkward, cowardly. No one made eye contact with me, not even the CEO. He stared at the conference table like he hoped it might become a trapdoor. I stood, slowly. There's a pending fraud escalation, I said. My voice didn't shake. It never did. My role includes managing the system timeline. If the workflow isn't reassigned before the next checkpoint, it triggers. Blake raised a hand like I was a waitress interrupting his podcast. Thank you, Joanna. We've already reviewed the technical impact. You'll be fine. HR has your packet. I stared at him, not in anger. In that strange, calm way you might look at a man about to touch an electric fence after being warned 3 times. Have you reviewed the federal statute tied to that workflow? He gave me a wink, an actual wink, and said, don't worry, we'll Google it. I left the boardroom in silence, walking past the glass walls and the open-plan desks where younger staff typed furiously, pretending not to see me. HR handed me the exit envelope like it was a wedding invitation. I thanked them. They didn't reply. Back at my desk, I didn't pack photos or water plants. I logged into the system, opened the compliance console, and ran a full export, every memo, every alert, every timestamp submission linked to the vendor anomaly. I encrypted it, archived it to the legal drive, and CC'd it to internal counsel marked for audit continuity. And I revoked my own credentials. See, there's a misconception about compliance people. Folks think we cling to control, but that's not it. What we actually cling to is clarity, boundaries, responsibility, ownership, and when ownership ends, so does liability. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out. No speech, no tears, no second glances. They'd cut the wire. I just stopped holding it. By noon the next day, the first email bounced. It was a standard compliance update, low priority, auto-generated, scheduled weekly. It was supposed to route through my now deactivated credentials to confirm resolution of flagged transactions. Instead, it hit a wall and ricocheted back to the system like a boomerang with bad news. No one noticed at first. The machine didn't scream. It whispered. 20 minutes later, the second alert went out, this time to the dashboard only I used. One where red turned to blinking red and blinking red turned to black. A box popped up, escalation path incomplete. Auto report protocol begins in 24H. That line had been in the system for years. I helped write it. It was our nuclear option, not because we wanted to punish the company, but because someone needed to tell the truth when humans got too lazy to do it themselves. And now it had been triggered, automatically, silently. Blake didn't notice. He was too busy posting a photo of his lunch, a $38 poke bowl with a caption that read, Boss Energy. No regrets. Somewhere inside the building, a junior legal assistant opened the internal portal and frowned. The vendor fraud report, last touched by J. Price, was now locked. When she tried to reassign it, the platform asked for elevated credentials. She didn't have them. She emailed IT. IT shrugged. Didn't she leave? Legal pinged HR. Who owns this workflow now? No one answered, and the clock kept ticking. Back at home, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Not that I noticed. I'd pulled up a local copy of the compliance flow just out of curiosity, watching the timestamps flip over like doomsday digits on an old digital alarm clock. 19 hours left. I wasn't mad. I was tired. Tired of being the fire extinguisher they broke glass to use, and then resented for making a mess. Tired of being the ghost who saved their asses from federal audits they didn't even know they triggered. Tired of watching men like Blake hold steering wheels they didn't know were disconnected. So I sat and watched the process unfold the way I designed it to. Not for revenge, not for glory, just for gravity. At the office, emails started piling up. Flags blinked. Statuses flipped. The vendor discrepancy, now officially unacknowledged and unassigned, hit its internal final notice status. That alone should have set off a dozen alarms, but no one had my access level anymore. They'd cut that wire, and they never thought to tie it to someone else. I had no obligation to tell them. My duties ended the minute Blake signed that release form with a flourish and a smirk. The second he declared me inflated, he popped the air mattress they were all sleeping on. By nightfall, someone in legal finally scrolled far enough into the platform's logs to see the countdown bar. Bright red, blinking. They sent a Slack message to Blake, need urgent review on unresolved compliance item. Platform says 14H to federal escalation. Blake's response, lol, is that real? Yeah, Blake, it's real. And the clock doesn't care if your lunch got likes. At exactly 2:37 p.m., someone from legal finally asked the question they should have asked the moment Blake tossed my job into the dumpster fire of his reorg. Hey, who owns compliance platform credentials now? Silence. Not the quiet kind, but the kind that thickens the air. The kind that feels like holding your breath underwater and realizing no one planned for the swim back up. They pinged IT. We assumed Blake reassigned it. They pinged HR. Don't manage platform ownership. They pinged finance. We thought it was automated. The platform didn't wait. Its status alert flipped from yellow to red. Warning critical, unassigned compliance risk. 7H41M remaining until federal autoreferral. In the open plan bullpen, a junior analyst named Mia scrolled through archived memos, trying to figure out what this pending escalation was all about. She'd only been with the company for 6 months. She still brought her own lunch and actually read the onboarding manuals. She dug through the internal SharePoint and found a memo dated 2 weeks prior. 2. Legal subject. Reassignment of mandatory disclosure role. Urgent, my name on the sender line. A full summary of the vendor anomaly. Itemized bullet points. Federal statute cited in paragraph 2. Plain English. No jargon, no drama. Just a polite heads up that if no one assumed responsibility for the disclosure process, the system would interpret silence as deliberate concealment and initiate escalation. She forwarded it with a blinking subject line. Did anyone do this? No one replied. Mia clicked into the platform console and saw the countdown in real time. 06-2239, 06-2238, 06-2237. Back home. I was sitting in my reading chair, half listening to a podcast about the psychology of disaster response. I had a blanket over my knees and a tab open to the headlines. Nothing yet, but the wire was stretching. I opened my old sent folder, not because I needed proof, but because I needed closure. I found the memo Mia had stumbled onto. Rereading it, I felt like a ghost revisiting the scene of her own murder. Every warning had been there, every deadline spelled out, every workflow explained in clean, measured language. I even ended it with a line I remembered typing through clenched teeth. Silence in this case is not neutral. It is interpreted by the system as active noncompliance. Detachment washed over me, not glee, not righteousness. Just a sort of melancholy calm. I'd spent years being the quiet line of defense. Now they had to learn what the absence of a boundary feels like. A wall doesn't make a sound when it's standing. It's the crash they notice. At 7:12 a.m., the system did exactly what it was built to do. It didn't hesitate, didn't ask for a second opinion, didn't care that it was Tuesday or that some overpaid intern had yoga at 8. The compliance portal executed its auto-escalation protocol, line 228 in the workflow I'd helped write 3 years ago, back when the company still pretended to care about best practices. The flagged vendor discrepancy, unacknowledged, unassigned, unresolved, was automatically transmitted to the relevant federal agency. Timestamped, logged, packaged neatly with all supporting documents and audit trails, like a coffin with all the nails pre-hammered. The email hit the agency's internal server at 7:12:37. By 7:14, an acknowledgement had already been sent back. The portal flagged the incident as external inquiry initiated. The company's obligation wasn't optional now. It wasn't a suggestion, it was law. Once the referral hit, they were legally required to cooperate with a full audit, provide all related documentation, and demonstrate mitigation steps taken since the risk was first flagged. Which, of course, would be difficult, because no one had taken any. The one person who had was now watching birds out her kitchen window, buttering toast. I'd woken up early, not out of nerves, but instinct. Some part of me wanted to feel the second it happened. When I saw the system notification hit my personal archive inbox, my legally retained blind copy from the auto-referral sequence, I didn't smile. I just exhaled, not like someone triumphant, like someone finally standing up after holding a heavy box too long, because this wasn't revenge, this wasn't sabotage, this was gravity. They kicked out the support beam. The ceiling fell. That's not malice, that's physics. I poured my coffee. It tasted better than usual. At HQ, panic hadn't hit yet, it was still early. Blake hadn't checked his email. The CEO was likely en route, still convinced his biggest concern that morning would be why his cappuccino had too much foam. But legal had seen it. They were always first. The associate who'd first noticed the red alert the day before opened her inbox and nearly dropped her phone when she read the subject line. SEC notification. Immediate attention required, auto escalation triggered within 5 minutes. The general counsel was calling Blake's cell. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. At 7:41, he texted, "We've got a problem. A big one. Call me ASAP." Meanwhile, the compliance platform kept humming along like a thermostat in hell. Cool, detached, unapologetic. It had done its job more faithfully than the people who were supposed to tend it. I knew how this would unfold. I'd written the steps. They'd scramble, beg IT to roll back the trigger, you can't. Wonder why the system didn't warn them first, it did. And ask who approved the protocol, they did, in Q2 of 2021, after I showed them what happens if we don't. The absurdity of it all made me laugh, but only a little. It wasn't funny, not really, just inevitable. The call came at 9:06 a.m. I was rinsing out the coffee pot, still in my robe, halfway through a crossword puzzle where every clue somehow felt like an insult. The ringtone startled me, not because it was loud, but because the name glowing on the screen was one I hadn't expected to see again. Richard Callahan. The CEO, Blake's father, my old boss. The man who once told me, "You're the brakes, we're the gas, try not to slow us down too much." I let it ring twice. 3 times, then I picked up slowly, not out of curiosity, out of closure. "Joanna," he said, breathless. "There are federal agents in the lobby, right now." They showed badges. They asked for vendor logs and audit trails. They have a printed copy of an escalation timestamp that matches something. Don't even know what it is. What the hell is going on? I paused. Let the silence stretch. Let him feel how empty it is when no one fills in the blanks for you anymore. Then I said calmly, "That's the compliance portal doing exactly what it's programmed to do when a fraud risk goes unresolved and unacknowledged past its statutory window." He sputtered. But why would it trigger now? "No one authorized, no one had to authorize it," I said. "It was automatic. Supposed to be, that's the entire point. You remember, right? The audit response framework I built and walked you through. Twice." There was a long pause on his end. Then, "Why didn't someone stop it?" I didn't sigh, I didn't scoff. I just replied, "Because you terminated the only person authorized to prevent it." Another pause, this one heavier. He tried again, a little softer. "Can you come in, just for the morning? Help us walk them through. I'm no longer employed with your company, Richard. Joanna, please, I made every effort to warn you. I documented everything. I followed protocol. This isn't my fire. I didn't light it." He fell quiet, just breathing on the other end. Probably watching suits flash badges down in the glass atrium, where the receptionist was almost certainly texting her sister something like, "You won't believe this shit." He finally muttered, "This is going to kill us." I didn't answer, because honestly, maybe it should. The kind of company that trusts a frat boy with a budget scalpel more than the woman who spent years shielding it from collapse, it deserves to learn what collapse feels like. Still, I wasn't cruel. I wasn't vindictive. That part of me, the part that needed validation, was long gone. Burned out somewhere between the 3rd ignored memo and the 100th time I was told, "Don't overreact." I said, "Good luck, Richard," and hung up. No dramatic click, no power pose. Just me, standing barefoot on cold kitchen tile, holding a phone that finally stopped ringing. Legal figured it out around noon, which, considering the size of the fire, was impressively late. The general counsel, Brad, who once told me compliance was basically just documentation with a fancier title, stood in a war room now hastily assembled in what used to be the Nap Pod Lounge. His collar was wilted. His tie looked like it had been chewed. He had 3 interns pulling every policy I ever wrote and 5 more combing through vendor contracts like the company was on trial, which, give it another 48 hours, it might be. He was mid-sentence on a conference call with external counsel when Mia, the junior analyst, slid a printed copy of the escalation memo in front of him. He stopped. "Read it." Twice. Then he asked the room, very quietly, who was listed as the escalation owner in the portal. Mia, without looking up, answered, "Joanna Price." Credentials deactivated per Blake's restructure order. No reassignment was processed. Brad closed his eyes, like maybe he could undo the last 48 hours if he just wished hard enough. "So," he said, more to himself than anyone else, "we removed the one person who could stop the system timer and didn't replace her." Mia added, "The auto-escalation protocol assumes concealment if there's no designated owner and the deadline expires." "Concealment," Brad repeated, as if the word personally insulted his JD. "That's what this now looks like to the feds?" "Yes," Mia said. "That's exactly what it looks like." Brad didn't say anything for a long time. just stared at the memo like it was a Ouija board spelling out you're screwed. By the time the 2 p.m. vendor contracts meeting rolled around, 5 external partners had already paused operations pending compliance review. A sixth had frozen disbursements. One even issued a formal breach notice. They were dropping fast because when the SEC comes knocking, no one wants to be the company still holding hands with the suspect. Word spread like mold in a locker room. Slack lit up. Employees whispered in elevators. Rumor surfaced that Blake had tried to delete the platform alert before realizing he didn't have admin access. Someone screenshotted the agent badges in the lobby. It made its way to Twitter, where a former intern tweeted, "Remember when they fired the only person who knew where the landmines were? Yeah, they're tap dancing now." But the worst came when the board met privately that evening. Brad presented a slide with 5 bullet points. 1. Joanna's role included sole authority for compliance workflow overrides. 2. No documentation shows a reassignment of that authority. 3. The fraud alert was documented, unacknowledged, and allowed to expire. 4. The escalation was automatic and non-discretionary. 5. The platform is legally certified. The assumption of concealment now triggers penalties. One of the board members, a retired DOJ investigator, sat back in his chair, hands folded. Asked, "So you're saying we built a safety mechanism and then ignored it?" Brad didn't reply. He didn't have to. They weren't looking at a blunder. They were looking at negligence. The kind you can't PR spin. The kind that leaves a permanent stain. The kind that comes with $signs and subpoenas. Back at home, I fed my cat, flipped on the news, and saw the first headline crawl across the ticker. SEC probes tech firm over compliance breakdown and vendor fraud alert. I muted the TV, not out of smugness, just peace. The boardroom looked like the aftermath of a corporate car crash, papers scattered, voices frayed, and not a single bottled water untouched. The CEO, Richard, was sweating through his undershirt, collar unbuttoned like he'd just run a marathon in a courtroom. No one had touched the pastries. Blake sat at the far end of the table, gray around the edges in a way only pure, undiluted panic can do. His hair was no longer artfully tousled. It looked like he'd clawed through it on the way in. The smugness that once filled every corner of his posture had collapsed into a slouch so deep he might have vanished into the seat cushions. Brad stood at the head of the table, calm in that way attorneys get when they're already triaging their own liability. His tone was clipped, surgical. Summarize, by eliminating the chief compliance officer role without reassigning its escalation authority, you severed the internal buffer designed to prevent automatic federal disclosure. He paused to let that sink in. The silence was so thick you could have iced a cake with it. The system, by design, interpreted the inaction as deliberate concealment. The referral was triggered automatically. We can't claim sabotage. We can't claim ignorance. The protocol followed its programming, and the agency now believes we were hiding something. A board member, a venture capitalist who once tried to pitch a tequila brand mid-Q4, rubbed his face and muttered, "Jesus Christ." Another leaned forward. Who made the call to eliminate her role? Everyone looked at Blake. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I didn't realize you didn't ask to realize," Brad snapped. "You didn't read her memos, you didn't review the protocol, you didn't speak to legal. You fired the one person who understood the consequences of silence, and then told the system to shut up." Richard, the CEO, looked like a man watching his own obituary write itself in real time. Outside the boardroom, agents in dark suits were already conducting interviews, quiet, polite, but immovable. Reception was closed. 2 federal vehicles idled in the loading dock. Staff had been told to remain at their desks. Phones rang. No one answered, and then came the final blow. The board chair stood, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Blake, we'll need you to step outside." "For what?" he croaked. "Because if we don't remove you now, the optics suggest we condone your decision-making. And frankly, we can't afford any more assumptions of negligence." An assistant opened the door. Blake looked to his father for help. Richard didn't meet his eyes. Blake rose, wobbled slightly, walked out. No one clapped. The door clicked shut behind him. Back in my house, the sun hit the side of my office just right, warming the hardwood under my feet. I was reviewing a local grant proposal for a nonprofit I'd promised to help when my email pinged. From HR at Lexivinscom subject, we saw the headlines. "Can we talk? No resume attached. No begging, just an offer to talk." They knew who I was now, they knew what I'd done. Correction, what I'd stopped doing. The dam broke. The river flowed, and now all I had to do was pick which shore I wanted to stand on. No revenge. No courtroom monologue, no gloating Instagram posts. Just gravity doing its job. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.